Welcome to The Explainer. So, let's talk about America's nuclear arsenal. You've probably heard the story, right? That they're these super precise surgical tools, almost ethical in a way. Well, today we're going to dig into why that story might just be a myth and how the reality of raw power or yield tells a completely different and, frankly, much scarier story. This quote, man, it just gets right to the point. It's not a sniper rifle, it's a geological event. That's the mindset we need to be in for this conversation, because we're not talking about some precise military tool. We're talking about something that can literally reshape the Earth. So, let's break down this myth of precision a little more. What exactly is the official story we're all told? Right, so the story we're sold is that our arsenal has, grown up. It's evolved. It's precision guided. It's responsible. It's more usable. And that word, usable, is really, really important here. The whole idea is that accuracy makes these things somehow more moral, more humane, a sign of maturity. The message couldn't be clearer. If you're smart enough, you don't need brute force. It's a comforting thought, isn't it? That our weapons are less terrifying because we're so precise. But here's the billion-dollar question. Do the laws of physics actually care about any of that? To answer that, we've got to take a quick lesson in physics. And don't worry, there won't be a test. And the short answer is nope, not at all. Think about it. The incredible heat, the blast wave, the raw energy of a nuclear explosion. That's all just physics. It doesn't give a damn about our political talking points or our PR campaigns. Okay, first things first, we have to talk about yield. Forget precision for just a second. Yield is the raw, explosive power of the weapon. It's measured in how many thousands or millions of tons of TNT it's equal to. This, right here, is the true measure of what these things can actually do. And this chart really lays it all out. Accuracy, that's about hitting a specific point. It's a tactical feature, for a small target. But yield, that's a completely different beast. That's about destroying a massive area. It's not tactical. It's a strategic reality. It's the real measure of power. Now, here's where that whole precision argument really starts to wobble. See, the main way you'd actually use a nuke in a war is something called an airburst. You detonate it way up above the ground. Why? Because you want to maximize the destruction on the ground, the blast, the heat, all of it. So if your goal is to wipe out a huge area, how much does hitting a target with pinpoint accuracy really matter? Not so much, right? Now, the only time accuracy is absolutely critical is for a ground burst, like if you're trying to take out a super hardened underground bunker. But here's the catch. Ground bursts kick up a catastrophic amount of radioactive fallout. They're so incredibly dirty that military strategists want to avoid them at all costs. So the one scenario where precision is king is the one scenario nobody ever wants to see happen. So, all of this physics stuff, it actually reveals a huge strategic gap. A yield gap, if you will, between the US and its main rivals. And it's a gap that's hidden by all this talk about precision. Over the past few decades, the US got rid of almost all of its massive megaton-class warheads. The Cold War-era city killers. The focus shifted to these smaller, lower-yield devices. And what that did was create this massive split in strategy. You can see it right here. The US posture puts all this emphasis on accuracy. Meanwhile, you've got Russia and China, and they're still all in on massive, overwhelming yield. For them, it's simple. The ultimate currency of deterrence isn't the threat of some clean surgical strike. It's the raw, terrifying power of total annihilation. That's the only language they believe everyone understands. No questions asked. Okay, so this leads to a pretty big question, doesn't it? If the reality is all about yield and destructive power, why on earth are we so focused on telling this story about precision? Well, the argument presented in our source material is pretty provocative. It says that America's lack of knowledge on this stuff, our nuclear illiteracy, isn't an accident. It's actually cultivated. It's maintained on purpose. And the thinking goes something like this. Step 1. If people actually understand this stuff, they get a say, they have political agency. Step 2. With that agency, people start asking really uncomfortable questions about our strategy, about yield, about what would really happen. Step 3, the folks in charge, they really, really want to avoid those questions. So what's the conclusion? You stick to a simple, reassuring story about precision. And this brings us to the most important part of this whole discussion, the clash between this narrative we're told and the cold, hard reality of physics. Because here's the thing, power that's misrepresented becomes power that's misunderstood, and that's incredibly dangerous. If we don't get the true nature of our own arsenal, how can we possibly have an honest, grown-up conversation about national security, about what deterrence really means? This quote just nails it. Security is being sold as a psychological construct, not a physical guarantee. We're being sold a feeling of safety, wrapped up in these nice words like precision and control. But the messy, brutal, physical truth, that's kept behind the curtain.
At the end of the day, a public that's literate on this topic wouldn't be easier to control, that's for sure. But you know what? It would be a hell of a lot harder to mislead. It would empower people to hold leaders accountable for the real-world strategies they're pursuing, not just the nice stories they tell us.
Which leaves us with this one last question to chew on. If we don't truly understand the security we have, is it real security at all? When the story we tell ourselves is so different from reality, are we actually safe? Or are we just making ourselves feel better with a comforting myth? Something to think about. Thanks for joining this explainer.